Few places in the state of Alabama have an older or more continuous or even more interesting Methodist history than Guntersville. It dates back to the year 1822 when this area was still a part of the Cherokee Nation and has not been without a pastor except for 2 years during the Civil War. In 1822, Richard Riley, a half-breed Cherokee Indian, met Richard Neely, a junior preacher on the Methodist Jackson Circuit. Riley invited Richard Neely to come and preach to the Indians. Neely accepted, and in 1822 he crossed the Tennessee River at Gunner's Landing and began to preach to the natives. These early meetings were held in the homes of Richard Riley and Edward Gunner. And then in 1822, the Indians were included in a decision to establish a Methodist mission. The new Methodist mission was called Cherokee Mission, and its Indian name was Kusa-Nuami, meaning creek path, because it was situated upon the great war and hunting path of the creeks, which led from the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes. The mission opened a school in 1822 with 12 children and soon grew to over 100 Indians. Well, by the end of 1823, membership in the church was reported as 108 Cherokees and 43 blacks. In 1829, there were 448 church members out of the 1,028-member Cherokee Nation, not a single white person. This was the high water mark of work with the Indians. And then the agitation to relocate the American Indians to the west grew and continued with bitterness until their final removal from Guntersville in 1838. And at this point, we see a decline in our church membership. All at once, white people started coming to the church, and by 1834, numbers show a membership of 192 American Indians and 237 whites until the Indian population of the church disappears completely. In 1834, the Cherokee Mission was abolished, and we became a part of the Huntsville District. In 1869, the Methodists built the first building in town used exclusively as a place of worship on the lot where we currently stand. Though it was erected as a Methodist church, it was used by all the denominations that came into town until the Cumberland Presbyterians built in 1880. It was also used as a schoolhouse. The bell that currently hangs in the bell tower is from this original structure. At one time, it rang for every funeral in town, served as the school bell, church bell, and fire bell for the town of Guntersville. This first building was a frame structure, weatherboarded outside, sealed inside with heart pine, and finished in hard oil, and it stood until 1901. But in 1901, the church was remodeled. And during the remodeling, a severe gale blew it from its foundations with such damage that it was impossible to proceed with repairs. Work on this new building, which you see pictured here, began in September of 1901, and it was completed at a cost of $915. This congregation quickly outgrew this structure, and in this picture you see a picture of the United Methodist Church and its members and Sunday school class attendees in 1910. Well, as the congregation outgrew this building after only 12 years, in 1913 a decision was made to build again at a cost not to exceed $15,000. So work began on the new structure until World War I broke out in 1914. The building was stopped, and everyone in the church was left without a place to worship. So this church rented the Cumberland Presbyterian building across the street where Streamline Cleaners is now open, and that's where we worshiped. Finally, in the spring of 1917, conditions improved and the building project was restarted. On August 15, 1917, the cornerstone for the current building was laid. And by the summer of 1918, the building was ready to be occupied. By the end, for a total construction cost of $25,000. In order to raise money for the beautiful stained glass that you see in our current sanctuary, Mrs. Sam Henry, who is pictured in this slide, wrote about 500 letters to friends, business companies as far away as New York. She even wrote a letter to her favorite opera star asking for contributions for the church. She received about $1,500 and with it bought all of the beautiful stained glass windows that you see in our church today. Well, almost immediately after the current structure was occupied, we began to have problems with being able to seat everyone. In this picture, you see what the sanctuary used to look like. This is a picture of a wedding in the sanctuary in the 1940s. Where you see that big wooden framed area, that is what is now the choir loft, and that was a big sliding glass door that they would open during revivals to seat more people. And here is another up-close picture of what the sanctuary looked like in the 1940s. Sunday school classes met out front where the acolytes get their robes and their lighters. And this is what the church looked like at the end of the 1950s. In 1958, a decision was made to remodel the sanctuary and to bring it more up to date. And these are some pictures from the 1958 remodeling, and it looks very much like it does today. Then in the 1960s, the Methodist Church of Alabama had 3 conferences, and a lot of people don't know this, but there were 2 white conferences and 1 black conferences. When the bishops of those conferences wanted to meet together along with their joint cabinets, they were refused a place to meet by most congregations. However, Guntersville First United Methodist Church opened its doors, and this joint meeting was held here in our sanctuary, and it set the tone for the stand that our Alabama Methodist Conference would take during the Civil Rights Movement. The last major renovation to our sanctuary was in 1958, and there have been very few changes since that time. But since then, in the 1990s, a decision was made to expand the church. And so where the current Family Life Center is and the gym, a parsonage used to sit, and that was the building that our pastor lived in. And we made a decision to sell that building, and the people who bought it took it down the lake on a barge. And you can still see that structure on the way to Huntsville. It's on the left side of Highway 431 going to Huntsville, hidden in the woods. And we cleared the land. We had a groundbreaking ceremony and made room for our new sanctuary and gym. And that's what it looked like after we finished our construction. Then in 2002, we purchased property where the parking lots are located, and in May of 2004, we purchased the Baines House that is currently used for our young adult ministry and for receptions and different kinds of small groups and activities, and we know it as the house. In February of 2006, we opened Genesis in Southtown, our off-site ministry and outreach, and our worship center. And then in August of 2007, we purchased the Regions Bank building and renamed it the Armory, and currently it houses all of our youth ministry and our Genesis outreach programs. And then in November of 2009, we purchased the old A&P grocery store and food land, and now it serves as our new contemporary worship center. And serves also as our Celebrate Recovery Center on Thursdays, and it houses Room in the Inn during the week. At the end of the 1922 100-year dedication of this church, the pastor was quoted as saying, "This church has a history of which it may well be proud, and let us hope that with the erection of this beautiful building, it will enter upon an era of even greater usefulness and activity." And as we've grown from a membership of a few hundred to over 1,500, you can see that that certainly is the case for Guntersville First Methodist Church.